Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Wired for Wonder, where we dig into what is the future of work going to look like and how do we use the change that AI is bringing to change the workplace to better serve humanity. My name is Lori Kirkland. I'm with DeepHumanX, and I'm excited today to have Don Hammond with me, who is the CEO of a tech consultancy. Welcome to the show, Don.
Hi, it's a pleasure to meet you again.
Just for the audience, why don't you give us just a brief background about your history?
Yeah, sure. Without giving away my age, which is a little depressing. 25 plus years on the management side of the house. Last decade plus of that's been at the C level. Bit of a rare bird. I've been a CRO, a COO, and a CEO, so it kind of helps when it comes to cross functionality and kind of knowing how to help and build and scale companies, which is kind of the segue. Early in my career, I worked for some big legacy companies for the past 20, 25 years. I've almost been solely startups and turnarounds. And so pretty much if there's massive amounts of change going on, either really good or really bad change, I usually show up right around that time. But yeah, all in all, I have a few C-level exits and a couple of turnarounds at the C-level as well, successful ones. So yeah, it's been a fun ride.
Well, that's good. Then you're the change maker we want to be talking to because right, AI is bringing so much changes to the industry. And if
Massive.
we look back, we had the whole world had the pandemic, and now we've got AI that's really such an amazing tool, but it's causing a lot of stress and fear for people because of the fact that it's actually calling to light some of the things that really aren't working about work anymore. And so your experience as a CRO, CO, CEO, tell me, what do you think in today's time and place are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing leaders and companies having with the rapid acceleration that AI is bringing?
Yeah, I mean, without giving the obvious, right, which are, AI agents and things that they can perform, right, processes, efficiencies, and cross functionality. We all know those. I think the big part that, and maybe this is already an existing issue, and maybe it's just going to cause more more damage. I think it's just insight, and what I mean by that in particular is the people side regarding people. Hiring and talent assessment has been a bit of a highly unproductive, you know, speed dating game for the past 20, 25 years. I think there is a tendency where people all ask these standardized questions, yet they're looking for these deep and thoughtful responses. And again, it's very calculated. It's very process driven. And I think the outcome there is no one really gets to meet one another. No one gets to learn one another. And so you end up hiring someone maybe you didn't know very well, or maybe worse yet, you didn't hire someone who was a perfect fit because you didn't get to know them either. And so I think there's an idea here where I think there's going to be certain complexities here where I think the game plan, if companies do it correctly, spend less time hiring people that you like, spend less time asking canned questions, and spend more time trying to figure out if they possess the type of intangibles that companies really need. And that might be what's their ability to make competent decisions, or what's their ability to learn and their ability to take direction, or uh, are they honest? Do they have the right work ethic? And or they're just the ability to adapt and change, which probably there's a segue right into executive and leadership, the adapt and change part of this AI side, where I think people have already kind of been lengthening their distance to knowing their people, understanding their people, truly meeting their people. I'm not sure if AI is going to make that. I have a feeling that's going to cause an even considerable higher risk. And so, in order to be able to manage that properly at the executive level, I think it's going to be really beneficial that you're learning very quickly. When are you learning dealing with reality? When are you dealing with fiction, right? People in their even their qualifications and so forth. And it'll be very helpful to work with people that you can not just trust personally, but professionally as well. Because as you know, um, data bias, privacy issues, intellectual theft. I hate to say this, but AI might become a sociopath's dream, right? I'm building their.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't sound nice to say, but I think it's certainly something that we all have to have talk
I
about.
think we just have to say it, like, right? Like, that is the truth. Like, if we as leaders only focus on data and privacy, right? Like that's where the effort's going to be put into it. And any type of change, there's always going to be bad actors and there's always going to be good actors. And right where I feel like we have this opportunity as leaders is going back to what you talked a lot about here, which is like connecting with the actual humans that you're working with. Like, can we work together? Can we solve problems together? Or do you value and have the same ethics I do? Right. And can we, multiply that versus multiplying the bad actors? Because there's so much that AI can do that is outside of data and privacy. We've spent 2 decades telling people that data is the most important thing. And now we're at the place where we have all this data and we can actually do something with it. And we're not seeing that switch over from leadership quite yet. But it really feels like we are on the precipice of, like, as leaders, we need to start actually thinking about not can we build this, but what do we want to build? Like, how do we look at the bigger picture and move forward? Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, so look, I think you're hitting on something that, and I just had this conversation with a few people the other day down in South Florida, and we're having some conversations and some other CEOs, and look, trust. Trust is a major, and so there's a catch-22 here. It's trust between you and your team, right? Who can I trust? Who's actually doing this work versus who's gotten really good at ChatGPT, right? Now,
Yeah.
some people might say, what's the difference, right? Hey, as long as I get the work done, right? So now all of a sudden there's a conversation falls in that. But also, I think where a lot of this comes down to, I mean, technically, what did the internet do for us, right? It gave us
Yeah.
all the world's information in the palm of our hands. And it turns out not everybody went and got a lot smarter or necessarily better, right? But they did certainly have a lot more information. I think there's a tendency where people will go find information they want to have, right? And so I think the AI side of the house of this could also get very similar in that scenario where, well, look, it's like any burgeoning industry, whether it was tech in the 90s and early 2000s, whether it was renewables, whenever you have industries with massive growth, 20, 25% CAGRs and all that kind of stuff, whatever,
Yeah.
your get rich quick people show up like
Oh,
ants
yeah.
to a picnic, right? And they are all about it. And then hopefully what happens is though is as the industry matures, it weans out some of that bad element that came in for the fast dollar and that sort of thing. But we're already seeing with AI, right? AI's, even with best case scenarios, best efforts, we're seeing some pretty, at the very least, we can say muffled data that's being shared. We certainly all aren't in agreement that what they're saying is true versus this one's true, and maybe there's more than one truth, right? Something else we have to be able to decipher and figure our way through. But if you're leading a company in today and over the next handful of years, there is going to be a lot of is this true or not going on inside your organization.
Yeah.
How data is being produced, how's productivity come, where is it coming from, how's it happening, and so yikes.
It's so interesting because you just, like, my mind is racing with so many things, like everything from, right, what problems are your teams going to solve? If you're still giving your teams a list of tasks to do and they get it done, a worker gets it done in 4 hours instead of 40 hours, like,
Right, is that bad?
in the short term, hey, good for you. But as a leader, don't we have the responsibility to say, hey, okay, productivity and efficiency, everybody wants that. We all want to make money. Like, can we just say that is the standard baseline? That's not what we're working for. Instead, we have to look at what is it, if you get 50% of your time free, what is it that you'd love your team members to be focusing their attention on, right? And that is a shift in leadership, which means that DeepHumanX, we work with a lot of companies. We do AI enablement. So we are tech agnostic, but we work a lot with the change management side. And what we see is leaders have been a little bit of lazy leadership where they're so used to telling people what to do instead of saying, I don't know, and we have to solve a bigger problem together. And that is a mindset shift, but it's also where you build your own personal trust and your team gets to build trust with you. So when I share that with you and you think about all the change management stuff you've been through, tell me a little bit about how you view the people side of change versus implementing a piece of technology.
Well, if I can go back a step, I think you made an interesting point. And you talk about lazy leadership. Yeah, it's a big conversation topic. But so I'm not one. Look, in general, people don't like to hear this, but middle management runs companies. They do. So you can get over it. And lazy leadership is a product of the system,
Yes.
or bad leadership, whatever adjective we want to put in front of leadership that's not very positive. That's part of the system, and that system is created by the executive team. That the system is created by the HR team. That system is created by the legal team. That system is created, but it's certainly not created by the middle management team. And so I think there's something to be said. I mean, I owned a consulting company for a handful of years and then sold it a couple of years later. I was never a big fan of the hands-off type of work type scenario, but after it was all said and done, it became very clear the moment, I cashed my check and walked out the door. They were going to go back to what they were doing previously, right? So you could spend as much time you want to with the middle management thing. Executive leadership, if you want change, then go make it. Stop
Yes.
depending on other parts and facets. HR is easy to beat up on. It really is. But 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 they're being sent out there by executive teams to create a certain culture, to create a certain mentality. Now, are they doing exactly the way executive teams? I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. It depends on where you're at. But I can tell you this much.
Talk to your people to find out it.
There you go. Perfect. That is the perfect segue. I find it amazing. My wife and I were just joking the other day. She came over to my office the other day. We went up the elevator. Of course, a kid I don't know came into the elevator, right? And I don't know him. He knows who I am, right? And I just made the comment, wow, this is going to be a 30-second ride, and I bet it's going to be pretty uncomfortable, unless someone talks, right? And I kind of joked about that. Look, if you're getting into an elevator and one of your team members, and I don't care what level they're in, and it never occurs to you probably need to have a conversation with them, just because it's literally your job, you're missing out on probably what it is supposed to be your job. And now, granted, maybe I look at this differently. I'm not running multi-billion dollar organizations where the sectionality is so vast and so forth. I take companies from 20 to 200 million, or I fix it and spin it back around so it goes from 70, from 30 and back to 100, or whatever the case may be. But I do know this much. If I don't put my nose in there, I can't complain that the output isn't
Yes.
what I want it to be.
It's so interesting because I think you're tapping on something that is like there's this opportunity for AI to disrupt it, because the speed at which people are learning on their own is meaning that it's highlighting the dysfunction of that separation between leadership and the actual people who are working. And I mean, it causes a lot of strife. It causes a lot of feeling like people can't contribute because they're getting directives and they're not able to actually contribute however they need to contribute. And I mean, it's really funny because we've almost gone so standardized and process heavy, which yes, we all need, but we've like taken out the ability to problem solve for individuals. And like,
Yeah.
that's the greatest gift of humans
No.
is like, we are complex and artistic, but right, evolutionarily, we are change agents. We are adaptive beings that want to contribute to something greater than ourselves.
Yeah. If the very first question when we were talking just here at the beginning, and it was, people go through this and they go, well, and it turns into like a bad eBay search, right? Where you click enough buttons and it turns out you went from 500,000 products down to 2, right? Because you literally made so many stuff. And, that's what we do with CVs and resumes. And then, if you didn't answer this thing the way I wanted to hear, then when's the last time someone put someone through a process of tell me how you make a competent decision? Bring up any topic. I don't care. You tell me what the topic is. How do you make a good decision? Or, I think there's something to be said. There's a question I always ask during interviews, and I only ask this of like director level, VP level, and even C level. And it's not that there's necessarily a right or wrong answer, but there's kind of a right and wrong answer. And then I give them a choice. A product with C leadership to join a company, or, C product and A leadership. And I'm always stunned that 70, 80, whatever percent of people say, I'll take the A product. And I kind of
Really?
they always say the product, right? And I'm always stunned at that, right? Because again, some of us are old enough to go back to .com and so. Let me tell you something: the best product very rarely ever wins. But
No, it's not about being it's all about market fit and timing.
absolutely, you find
And
a leadership team and they will take a C product and own the marketplace. I've seen A products literally blow away in the dust because the company's so poorly managed and so forth. Yet
yeah,
you still have 60, 70, 80% of director, VPC level people going, I'll take the A product, I'll take the A product. It's really not. Look, give me enough opportunity. I'll brand that C product into an A for you in your brain for you, right? Versus that A product, I don't pitch it the right way. So this is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. We don't really teach business acumen anymore, right? We'll teach someone about our own personal product, but for years when I was a CRO, I used to find incredibly frustrating. You see people, oh, must bring Rolodex, must have industry experience. Okay, well, let me ask you a question. Industry experience means they work for your competitor, correct? Can you think your competitors giving up their A and B players? Probably not. So now you're in the process of trying to build your organization around your competitors' B, C, and D players. And to go get their A, you're probably going to have to overpay for them. And by the way, they probably are a better fit for that system. That's why they're an A player where they are. But my whole basis is I've created multiple sales organizations over the years. And the big thing is what's your ability to take direction? How competent are you? What's your business? If not, how teachable are you? I'll tell you what, I'll teach you the product in a week. The rest of the stuff we'll spend the next 90 days over, and we'll make you formidable at what you do, right? And then hopefully you'll build and scale an even bigger player, and you build and grow with the company. But we don't do a lot of that today, right? Most of the time, I want to teach you my product, but teach them how business works. Explain them what the silos are between finance, revenue, and operations. Explain to them what market share. What's a legitimate go-to-market strategy, target market, product differentiation, buyer persona, pricing. Teach people how to do some of this stuff. But I think that's part of it, right? A lot of that comes down to leadership courage, right? And a lot of
yeah.
people don't want to share the information and data they have, which brings us into a nice AI segment. You don't have to share it for me anymore. I'm going to go on to Grok and I'm going to go find it out.
Well, I mean, that's what I feel like leaders who are missing it. And that's where I think, right, why we're having this conversation out in the public is like, look, there is a shift. What once was like my knowledge is actually my own data is my value. It's like data has been democratized. Anybody can get information. I can create a custom bot to think like Jeff Bezos and at the same time Oprah Winfrey, right? Like I can get that perspective um, at my fingertips. So now knowing the processes and ways that your organization runs or the things that you've been through, what really becomes of value is how do you solve problems? How do you stand in the face of change when it's nice to be a little bit older to realize one, change is always happening whether you're admitting it or not, but two, if you're grounded in your own purpose or kind of what your values are, you know that there's always another solution, right? There's always another way to look at things. And those challenges don't become so frustrating, especially as a leader when when you're hooked on A plus B equals C, but you just had a, meteorite dropped into your nice, perfect plan. How are you going to go forward now? Which is kind of what AI is doing.
Well, this is gonna reek a bad undergrad, right? After it's all said and done. And what I mean by that is, one, did you do the course reading? If you didn't, probably going to be tough sledding on that blue book you're at exam. But the flip side is, did you read it versus did you plagiarize it? Right. And I think that's where the AI side of this is going to get really interesting, right? There's a big difference between I'm giving you information that I've accumulated because I've learned it, and this is what I do, versus I just cut and pasted a section out of Encyclopedia Britannica or whatever or book I went after from back in the day. And then I put that on there and I said, look, this is my work. Right. And so it's going to get very interesting from a leadership perspective. How do I judge people now? Right. Like from a
Yeah.
leader, is it based strictly on productivity? Because all of a sudden, learned knowledge and experience becomes incredibly discounted versus Billy over there in the corner is just a rock star at ChatGPT and Grok. And it turns out, because now we get into that weird spot, right? Is that really his work? And if it is, does it really even matter? And so forth.
Does it matter, right? Like the roles that we've set so many years clearly defining, and we already talked about the HR issue, clearly defining, like those are going to disintegrate a bit because everyone's job is changing. Yours as a leader, every one of your team members, like, and even if it's not today, it's tomorrow. Like the change is happening. But we have this like great opportunity, and this is actually what we see and work on a lot at DeepHumanX is that you've got to understand for yourself in the time of change, right? It's no longer A plus B equals C, right? Like that's a very nice linear industrial revolution type of thinking. But now we're moving to a time of change, right? Nobody knows where AI is going to end up. Nobody knows where our organizations are going to end up. I mean, you see the rifts and the divide all over the world, but people have this opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to ride the wave of change because I'm anchored in what is important to me. And if I can really get what I value, it sure does make anyone else coming up, or moving faster a whole lot easier because you're like, well, okay, that aligns with what I want or that doesn't. And then I get this choice of like, do I want to spend my time there or do I want to spend my time on something different? And that's a really powerful thing to be able to ride the wave of change versus, yes, we want predictable, but let's be real. A lot of the predictability we have is creating so much inefficiency in other
I
places.
mean, I absolutely agree. And I'll, if you don't mind, I'll play a little contrarian here because I think there's a bit of a balance how it works back and forth. So what do we know about AI? Okay, so there's going to be massive levels of new job categories, right? It's just like the internet all over again, right? And new job categories, some are going to go away, new ones are going to pop in. Work schedules are going to be absolutely silly, right? As global economy, plus again, if I get this done in 4 hours, why should that was one of the wins with sales reps back in the day, the really good ones that had like quarterly quotas. They would go hit it in like the first 4 weeks and they're like, I'll see you in 2 months, and you're like, that's why they were all scratch golfers, right? And then so, but and again, there would be AI, regulatory modifications, all those things are going to come in. But I think there's one thing that's not going to change. And with all of this, when we talk about all this change, there's one thing that stays the same. And it's, how do I word this? For years, I used to get invited to universities and colleges and go speak to soon to be business school graduates.
Okay.
And without a doubt, every time it'd be 200-300 people in there, there'd be like four of those little sycophants right in the front row. Right? And you knew who they were. And there was always one of them who would ask this question: what can I do to differentiate myself from everyone else in this room, right? You knew where they were going, right? Like, this kid's going to try and take over the world, right? You can feel it. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, I'm just saying it was predictable. And the answer I always gave was learn how to make competent, thoughtful decisions. Because if you can do that, you immediately become like the top 3 or 4% inside an organization. Now,
Yeah.
to that, with the AI side, we say data, right? It's not just enough to have data. It's not just enough to segregate data. It's how to create data. And I think the big thing is still going to come down to you can, pardon my French, you can vomit up as much data as you want.
Yeah.
Can you execute? Right? And I think execution is still going to be, look, you've been in boardrooms, so have I. There are people who can wax poetic for days, and then you come back 3 months later and it turns out nothing's been done, right? And then they'll tell you a news story. It sounds equally awesome as the last story. You come back 90 days later, nothing is done. And then you've got a guy or a gal who sits in the corner and they don't say boo. But from the last time you guys met, she's turned over entire departments and great success. Execution is just that. You can't fake it. People were in. And so I still think, while data plays an enormous role, it's always been my basis of the difference between a consultant, of which I played one for a while, a consultant versus someone who actually goes out there and gets it done. And if you're one of those people who's in that latter group, maybe someone works grok better than you. Maybe somebody, is better at creating some AI agents to increase efficiency, that sort of thing. But after it's all said and done, if you can lead people and if you can execute, you're awfully, awfully formidable in any organization.
I agree. I think that as we're looking at the future, right, anchoring in your humanness is actually going to become more critical because, right, you mentioned before cognitive dissonance, where yes, if you take the first answer ChatGPT gives you and you list it and that's your answer, like, well, shame on you. You're being lazy right there, and that will make you dumber. We've watched it with the internet, right? But you also have the ability to be like, okay, so I got that question answered. Now I'm going to actually practice my critical thinking about how do I actually now turn this into creating an outcome. And that is where I think there's a big separation, and we're going to see the executors rise to the top, because they're the ones who are going to be like, oh, wait a minute, this is AI can be my thinking partner, my thought partner, my
Perfect.
challenge
You
resolution,
nailed that.
versus doing it for me. Like, can we let's have some personal accountability and desire to solve the problems. And that does have to be internal. But when you have that as a leader, you then give others around you the opportunity for them to also work on their what moves them, and you guys work towards common goals.
You nailed a big portion of that, and it was one of the things that, again, I used teaching management players, so how do we become competent decision makers? And one of the things I always gave them a simple way of doing was past, present, future, right? And it was actually present, past, future. And it was, okay, let's objectively ask ourselves, where are we at today? That's the person who punches it into chat GPT, right? Where are we at today? Yeah, I figured that out. Okay, but now you've also got to go, how did we get here, right? You got to go into the past. That means you got to do some follow-up questions with ChatGPT, right? What caused these scenarios, whatever. And then, okay, if I'm to do A, B, or C, what are the potential, kickouts that can happen, from those decisions being made? That's competent decision making. I figured out where I'm objectively at today. I objectively took from the past to figure out how we got here, this good and bad decisions that we made. And now I have an A, B, or C, or D approach that says, here are some of my options, and what are some of the good and some of the bad that can come out of these things, right? That is more than what AI can do for you.
Yes. Oh my God, you're nailing. So we use this thinking model called the relevance model, which our main steps are: set your context, find your relevance or purpose, right? Your context is, like you said, really the present. Like, what are you looking at right now? The past, your relevance is like, what are the things that are really valuable to you? And then we have a step called lessen the define, which is much like your future, but it's really around creating multiple choices for yourself for the same scenario. And that means, when we say lessen the define, we mean take away some of the barriers you have, right? Like, everyone who's ever been in a corporation knows that there are unwritten rules and there are unwritten processes. Well, sometimes just questioning doesn't mean you have to get rid of them, but just looking at, like, is this actually hindering us towards a future, or is it helping us? Then you get that choice to decide whether you continue or not. So I love that. For people listening, it's present, past, future. That is a good tidbit of how to play with.
And maybe remember the objective part. And the reason I say that is that if you have a tendency to look at the past and go, everyone else made mistakes, but I did great, or if you have a scenario and you're looking at future potential solutions, sometimes we've got to make decisions that are just best for the company, not maybe best for ourselves, right? Or our teams and so forth. And I think that's also been some of the success over the years, where when I've come into new organizations, whether I'm the COO, I'll sit down with the CFO and the CRO, and I'll sit down with the other executive team. And one of the first questions I ask is, what can my group do to make your job easier? Right.
Yes. How can I be of service?
Right. And so the funny part is, and don't get me wrong, there's also a hitch there, right? Because now if I do things for you, owe me a favor later. But the part is, after it's all said and done, though, there is some reality to that, because look, I've come into organizations and we find out that if one department spends 30 or 40 minutes at the beginning of, let's say, an onboarding process for a client, maybe it saves engineering 10 hours later on, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, we all have to sit down and map out these processes from start to finish. People need to be educated, understand. And maybe that's probably one of the benefits that I had early in my career. I did actuarial stuff back in the day. So, I was one of those nerds who literally went step by step through processes. And when they went through, and, it turns out, if you don't tell the guy at step 2 about how step 8 works, and it affects, he has no idea, right? She has no idea. So their whole thing is, look, you just told me to do A, B, and C. But if you let them know actually why they're doing what they're doing, God forbid, it turns out,
love that.
you can really bring on some people. Instead of them just being mindless drones and kind of going through the whole thing, they can go, what, believe it or not, if that's the case, then maybe we can talk about how we could skip 5 of these processes, but just by doing this in the early stages, right? And that's the kind of stuff that I think, especially if you're trying. Look, I realize my background is different than most. Most people are going into enormous organizations, and they a very small cog inside of massive, massive machines. And, versus maybe that's also why I left that world, as long ago as I did, where my basis was I hate red tape and I hate meetings. I really get fed up with that guy or gal we just talked about who waxes poetic about all the great stuff they're going to do and it never gets done.
Yeah.
Then
Oh,
somehow they get promoted, right?
yep.
That's why, I think most people, if you want them not to treat it like a job, then damn it, give them good reason to make it a
Yeah, give
career
them
thing,
a why. Give
right?
them
There's got to be
something that they can
buy-in.
align
Yeah,
themselves to.
yeah,
That they're like, oh, if the outcome is this, I could do it this way. But if I understand what we're trying to do, big picture, whether it's step 2 or step 8, and I still have that in mind, then I can work towards that outcome instead of just I feel confined to work in this process that somebody else mapped out for me, that they did it, let's say, 4 people in a room with a whiteboard, but didn't actually like take into account all of the different
yeah,
problems.
yeah.
So like leading in this time does require to start letting experimentation and failures happen, because things are not going to be predictable like they were, not in
Look,
the same way anyways,
yeah.
like they have.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a very blunt statement I'm going to make, and I don't remember who told me this, or maybe I made it up. I don't remember. But after it's all said and done, look, if you treat people like they're dumb, you'll have stupid results. And so it's one of
Yes.
those scenarios where treat people like they're smart. You'd be amazed at how intelligent the results can become, right? And by the way, sometimes people don't know how smart they are. So part of it is
Yes.
pushing them. And part of that is saying, hey, look, my expectations for you are a lot higher. Want to know why? Because maybe you don't see this, but I do. You're an A player who's so talented, you've been doing B work and you just turn around and let's don't do that anymore. Let's turn you into a commonplace A player, whatever.
Yes.
Or let's be honest, maybe you're a C player, but damn it, we're going to do what we can to turn you into a B minus or even a B, right? And you know what? There's a big difference in an organization between, a B and a C, and job, what you get paid, and job security and the other stuff that goes on there. And I won't lie to you, to anyone watching, if you're truly a D or an F player, people like me are going to work as hard as we can to get you out of the organization as quickly as possible. And I don't mean that to be terrible. It's because it
No.
rubs off onto other people.
Well, it might not be the right
Right.
environment, and we don't
Right.
have to look at that so badly. We have such a judgmental society of judging and fitting in and what's right and wrong. And it's like sometimes it's just not the right space for
I've
you.
seen
So
D
move on and find the right
Yeah.
environment for you.
I've seen D competency people who have great work ethic and moral compass who can become C and B players. And I've seen A players who quickly become D players because, again, attitude and whatever else that falls into that. So when I say D and F, those are the people, maybe there's a competency issue, but more than likely, there's a buy-in issue. And if you're saying, hey, that's because my company's not well run or whatever, then go find one that is, right?
Yeah.
And I can tell you this much, however miserable you think you are right now, it's only going to get worse, right? So go find a place that fits for you. Go find a place. Or here's something that's crazy: surprise everyone and come out of your shell and do what you're capable of doing, right? And again, I know this sounds a little pie in the sky and a little cheesy and all stuff, but look, I've seen dozens of people in my career when I came on board, and it never fails. I walk into an organization like, here's a list of the people we want you to let go, which you're always like, really? Why didn't you do that before I came on board? But it's one of those things. But there's tons of people who were on that list and they're supposed to go, and guess what? They were President's Council a year later, or they were, CEO Achievers Clubs, or all these other things, because you know what? They got in the right environment, they got in the right mindset, and they were able to focus the right way. So, by the way, if you're in an organization and you have team members that aren't doing it very well, it's your fault. And I hate to say that, but as a leader, it's your fault for one of three reasons. One, either hire the wrong person, or two, you're not motivating them the right way, or three, they're a lost cause and you haven't gotten rid of them. So either way, as a leader, it's your job to fix that. So, don't ever say you don't have the right team members, you don't have the right people, whatever. That's you in the mirror. So take
I
responsibility.
love that piece of advice for everyone, right? Like just take it on as if you are the leader. So take it on and know that you have to take that personal accountability to set up an environment where people can shine being themselves. Well, Don, you have so much insight and such good experience, and I've absolutely loved this conversation. If you were to give the audience uh, just three skills, human skills that you think they should work on in the next, 5 to 10 years to really stay relevant in this time of change, what would those three human skills be? What should they work on?
That's a good question. I think, I think we kind of hit on them to a certain degree. I think it's learn how to make competent decisions. If you don't know how to learn it, I mean, go put it into AI and go say, how can I make competent decisions? That present, past, future we just talked about. I think the ability to learn and take direction, which by the way has a lot to do with how your ability to adapt to change works out, I think. And then the third one is, and this is by far the hardest one. None of us like it. If you're not being honest with yourself, start immediately. Look in the mirror. Am I giving the best I can? If I'm not where I want to be at, why aren't I? And part of that answer is going to have to be yourself. And so what do I have to do to be better? What do I have to do to change and so forth? So it's kind of funny, right? I don't give anyone answers of like, oh, go download this app and make it. No, go look in the mirror and download that app, the mirror app, and you're not going to like it sometimes. But after it's all said and done, you're talking to the same guy who for years, look, tell you what, do some turnarounds. You'll find out how much people can say terrible things about you pretty quickly. So, I mean, there's a lot of change over there. But the big thing is, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons and your moral compass stays where it's at, it's hard work, but it's very fulfilling in the long run when you can fix things and give people opportunities. So I think that's the big thing. If you haven't found your niche, then go find your niche, but don't expect someone else to bring it to you. It almost never comes.
No, and if to anyone listening, if you're looking for some help with a mindset shift that's needed, please reach out to DeepHumanX. That is what we do day in and day out with leadership teams, boards, and kind of teams all organizational wide. And Don, if people wanted to reach you, what's a good place for them to go to?
Yeah, I still do a good bit of mentoring for people, and I help people with their companies in particular, startups and turnarounds, that sort of thing. I do a lot of pro bono work and stuff as well. So I'm just on LinkedIn. My wife and I left New York just this last year, so we're in Atlanta now. So yeah, just search. I'm pretty sure I don't know how many there are, but you can see my photo as well. It's just Don Hammond with in Atlanta, Georgia, CEO, and that search should bring you right up.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being on the show, and thank you everyone for listening.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much.